watching, and I invite all of you to pay the same respects to the elders of the land that you're occupying at the moment, wherever that may be. I also want to acknowledge that for all of us, that is sovereign Aboriginal land. And I would also like to acknowledge the presence of any First Nations people we have with us in our debate, or who may be joining us through our live stream in our virtual gallery. Cool. I think that's everything. I'm always nervous I'm going to forget something, but I think I've got it. So, okay, all right. I think we're good. So, with all of that said, I'm actually going to be our speaker today. How exciting. I've never been the speaker for a debate. I'm very excited. So with that said, the next, maybe does someone from Task Force want to tell us the next order of the day? I didn't really ask anyone to be the clerk. Would someone like to do that? Maybe Heap? Otherwise, I'll just have to be my own clerk. Do you want to Heap, would you just tell us what the next order of the day is, please? And just read out the name of the bill.
The next order of the day is, good question, is the, I'm looking at Tuesday, sorry.
Classic clerk stuff.
Is the Lowering the Age of Mental Health Confidentiality Bill 2021.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call on the sponsor of the bill.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Dua. I think the idea, is it okay if I start?
Honourable Member Dua, before you do you have the script book in front of you?
I'm not sure.
That's okay. What I'll get you to say before you start your speech, Honourable Member, is I would like you to introduce yourself again, and then I'll ask you to say, I move to introduce a bill titled, and then read the name of your bill.
Okay.
Do you want me to pop that in the chat so you can read it? I move to introduce a bill titled. Okay, so share that and then say the name of your bill for us.
I move to introduce a bill titled Lowering the Age of Confidentiality for Mental Health Support.
Beautiful. And then I will ask the House. The question is that the bill now be read a first time. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. And now, Honourable Member, you can reintroduce yourself and then say, I move that the bill now be read a second time, and then you can do your speech.
I move that the bill be read a second time.
Go for it.
I think the idea of a mental health day is something completely invented by people who have no clue what it's like to have bad mental health. The idea that your mind can be aired out in 24 hours is kind of like saying heart disease can be cured if you eat the right breakfast cereal. Mental health days only exist for people who have the luxury of saying, I don't want to deal with things today. And then they can take the whole day off. While the rest of us are stuck fighting the fights that we always fight, with no one really caring, one way or another. David Levitin, Will Grayson, one of my favorite books, actually. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Leonard Cohen. What if we block the cracks from where the light is supposed to be? The bill my team and I present aims to destigmatize mental health support, especially for young adults. The bill aims to reduce the age of confidentiality in mental health support for young individuals and will focus on an improved approach to confidentiality regulations, which will allow for more transparency, better conversation, and higher trust between young individuals and their mental health practitioners. The constant stressor of having your decisions being made for you, being the most idealized version of yourself, must not hang over like a sword on a young individual's head. The bill is rooted in our very lives. Yes, when you near being an adult, it is often an unrelentless chase of the future. That anxiety, the overwhelming nature of us becoming individuals and taking ownership of our own lives seems unreasonable when we at the very turning point don't have access to its secure approach. As a woman of color, there is definitely a certain plethora of stereotypes, and while it is ideal that we challenge and break them, it is a long journey. Today, as I use this platform, it is for those who feel they can't have a voice. And trust me, there are people that don't have a voice. If we can give 16-year-olds the right to take the wheel on a road, then why is it that we're hesitant to trust them with addressing their own issues without having to fear for its consequences? Consequences must not exist for people who need help, who are reaching out. The confidentiality age will aim to create a more authentic relationship and approach of the individual, where the breaching confidentiality guidelines must be followed. The notion of confidentiality can be broken by mental health practitioners if the practitioner believes an individual is at harm to themselves or others. For the breaking of confidentiality, an individual must show signs of, and I repeat, must show signs of threatening physical harm to themselves, threatening physical harm to others, showing signs of violence or immense distress to society as a whole. In regards to the mental health practitioners holding up their ethics, we also will aim to establish a review board for the same. In households where there is a history of abuse, violence, young individuals benefit in every way possible from such a support system. Our constant promises as a society to do better, be better, mean nothing without the implementation. And instead of waiting another 10 years, another 10 debates, another plan, like with our climate emergency as we do now, this bill will be brought into effect 6 months after its introduction. That is, if we believe in holistically making it happen for ourselves. We did leave this world to adults, the legacies before us, and they led us with a legacy of wars. We must not be the one passing this burden to those who come after us. With reference to its practicality, the bill only demands for a simple change and ensures regulatory system of checks and balances by the introduction of a review board and penalties as disclosed. I believe that if we together try and move forward with this, we may really make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Dua, and I call on the Honourable Member Hackett.
Speaker, Honourable Member Hackett. I'd like to begin by pointing out that in theory, this bill would make an incredibly positive change to our Victorian youth. However, upon reading it closely, the opposition has found many flaws, and it is because of this that we strongly suggest that it do not be passed in its current state. You see, the entire bill lacks clarity. The who, what, when, where, why, and how have been addressed, but not thoroughly enough. For example, in clause 4.2, what is actually meant by mental health practitioner? In clause 7, who will actually oversee this board and ensure they're following relevant legislation? What legislation are they even required to follow? In clause 8, it is stated that practitioners are given 3 chances if they breach confidentiality. We, the opposition, believe this is too much, as breaching confidentiality has a serious and potentially dangerous outcome. Furthermore, whilst I'm speaking about clause 8, I'd like to bring attention specifically to clause 8.3. If a mental health practitioner breaches the notion of confidentiality for the 3rd time without just cause, they will have their mental health practitioner licence revoked and shall not be able to practice going forward. Speaker, I'd like to direct the following question to the government. What do you mean when you say going forward? Can it be assumed that this means for a set period of time? Can it be assumed that this means permanently? Can it be assumed that this means until the practitioner attends a compulsory training unit that, if completed, may enable them to continue to practice and re-enter the mental health practice? We cannot assume. This is law. And if things need to be assumed in law, then they clearly lack clarity and need to be rewritten before they can be instated. On the topic of compulsory training, not once does it mention in the bill that practitioners will be mandated with extra training should they breach confidentiality of their patients. As someone who works in community services and has studied mental health, I know that usually when someone who is permitted to do a specific job fails at doing that job, they are given the opportunity to rectify their mistakes with training. Tell me, will the board be overseeing any training of practitioners, or will it not be considered at all? I won't go into too much detail as my counterparts will also be addressing the following, but I really must make members of the House aware that Clause 5 does not give current, informative and factual definitions of situations in which confidentiality must be breached. There are many circumstances missing from this clause where a practitioner is required by law to break confidentiality. This clause also mentions nothing of the process that must occur in order for confidential information to be legally shared with other client stakeholders. This is outright dangerous and must be addressed before this bill can be passed. Another dangerous aspect of the government's bill is that it mentions nothing of child safety, mandatory reporting, parental permission, and the process of which a patient must follow in order to make a complaint to the board. If there is a board being put into place, that should mean that all mental health practitioners must make this process clear to their patients, correct? Yet there is no mention of this in clause 6, 7, or 8. Lastly, the bill never clearly states why there is a need for such a reform. Does the government really expect for a law that allows an extra 2 years' worth of young people to have their confidentiality maintained, encourage young people to seek mental health support? I tend to believe this is unrealistic. There is no real purpose for this bill. That accounts what is already law within Victoria. Again, something that should be included within this bill is simply not. And for this reason, as well as all other reasons previously stated by myself, I call upon the members of the House to see the necessity of disallowing this bill from passing today. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member Hackett. And according to my list, I'm calling on the Honourable Member Parikh. Is that right? Lovely. I call on the Honourable Member.
Speaker, Honourable Member Parikh. Before I begin, I would like to address that this speech mentions child suicide, so please feel free to exit at any given point in time. Today, I take the initiative and honour of speaking on a highly important issue, mental health in the 21st century. Now, mental health has been a taboo topic for many generations. As a South Asian, I can offer you first-hand experience when I was told mental health is a hoax, and mental illnesses such as anxiety and depression are not real. And unfortunately, these views are not exclusive to South Asians, but to the Black, Hispanic, and Asian communities as well. And unfortunately, living in Australia, we have evolved from the white-only policy to a diverse country. But the disadvantages that come of being such a multicultural country is the generational avoidance of keeping our mental health a priority. In fact, the Australian Bureau of Statistics recorded that 21.7% of suicides were from the First Nation youth. And we have the power to end this. Our bill aims to reduce the confidentiality age from 18 to 16 for this very specific reason. So thousands of teenagers, specifically racially diverse teens, can reach out to someone without the fear of maltreatment from their own family. For many teenagers, school is the most accessible institution for them. Reaching out to external services is almost impossible. School offers a refuge to these students, and they need to be able to reach out to a school psychologist without any worry. This bill protects these teenagers, reduces suicide rates, and gives them the freedom to be in control of their mental well-being. But the main objective? By racially diverse teenagers prioritizing their mental well-being, we are ending this vicious generational cycle. In the next 10 to 20 years, when we are parents, we will not pass on our unspoken trauma upon them. We will not deny good mental well-being. Be a part of a generation that promotes, not denies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Parikh. And I call on the Honourable Member Balch.
Speaker, Honourable Member Balch. In Clause 6, 6.2, it is stated that prior to receiving mental health treatment, individuals aged under 16 must be advised of policies surrounding breaching confidentiality before seeking mental health treatment. This is all in good favour to make them understand the policies surrounding breaching confidentiality, but have they not considered the fact about when starting the first session asking for consent? Not just any type of consent, but will this be verbal or written consent? Written consent is defined as your agreement is given by signing a document for a treatment or procedure that is complex or carries a higher risk. Verbal consent is defined as when an individual clearly states their agreement to an intervention or procedure, which in this case, seen by the definitions written, consent would be the way to go. But that is not stated, therefore, is mandatory, as without any consent, there could be a lack of trust, as the client may feel that their confidentiality may be broken at any point, even though they have read through the policies surrounding breaching confidentiality. Written consent is also really important to have, as it breaks down any concerns that the patient may have before attending their first session. Like mentioned before, it is always good to have them read about breaking confidentiality, but that is completely different than asking for consent. Consent should be taken as written at the beginning of their first session, but in saying this, that means that they have to decide or change the fact that only 18s and over can sign a legal document. And with this, will this be a legal document? And if so, will the age of allowing someone to sign their own document be changed? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And could I have the next speaker please raise their hand, because I have a feeling that my list is not correct. Beautiful. I call on the Honourable Member.
Honourable Member Mwaka Songora. The demand for action with issues relating to what our bill addresses is constantly increasing as the majority of our Australian youth's mental health continues to plummet over time, especially due to prolonged lockdowns. Being confined in a space that protects individuals from the dangers of the outside world results in the increased dangers of one's mental state of being. There is a growing epidemic filled with anxiousness and depression that is consuming our youth. However, our bill aims to completely provide a remedy for the sufferings faced alone. It aims to completely remove stigmas surrounding seeking help, eradicating toxic traditional standards previously set in stone by unprogressive and conservative generations. Our bill aims to create a buzz in the media, letting our generations know that it is okay to not be okay, and that they're not alone, and that they're allowed to feel the emotions they do and share them without fear of judgment or betrayal, as supported by Section 7, which keeps our youth members aware of their rights, explicitly stating the consequences authoritative figures face when breaching them. It's finally time we break these chains of conservative prospects on mental health, negatively impacting our youths today. Our current confidentiality laws only pertain to those above 18, but what about our younger generations? What about those who are 16 and are not able to seek help because of these laws restricting them from doing so? By diversifying the ways in which our youth can reach out, every individual's well-being can and will be prioritized first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And, oh lovely, I call on the next speaker.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Noble. This bill deals with the upholding of confidentiality of children. Children are vulnerable, and we need to ensure that practitioners are doing the right thing. Some form of child safety policy is needed whenever we are dealing with those under 18, and this is an important factor missing in this bill. Clarification is also needed as to who is included in this practitioner definition. We need clarity as to who this includes so that regulations can be upheld. Breaking confidentiality is an issue that can have serious repercussions for the client, and more serious punishment is due for those who break it. We need to see a court summons for those who break this law so that safety can be upheld. I commend this bill's message, but further clarity is needed to ensure the safety of those receiving treatment.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member Noble. I particularly commend you on how quickly you pulled together a great speech. And I call on the Honourable Member Vernon.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Vernon. From the age of 6, all or at least the majority of Victorian children are enrolled at school. School is where we first learn educational requisites, but that's not all. Our first friendships are formed, our BFFs. Our first friendly, first crush, the place where we experience our truest self. Perhaps school was where we first experienced our first heartbreak, hit with the realities of adulthood. The message is clear that school has and will always be the first place for us for where we're faced with good or bad news. At the prime age of 16, though called sweet, I am gradually faced with the hardships of life, whether it is related to school or social circle qualms. Teenagers are growing into this person who does not deserve this unspoken burden onto their shoulders. We truly believe we're independent, and our problems, whether this may be a silly issue or a genuine stressful situation, are the first place we think of it as school. The one place where we spend 6 or almost 7 hours a day for 4 days a week. Why is it that this institution where we spend the majority of our lives does not cater to our needs? Would it not make complete sense that schools have been the most accessible service to us? And like the Honourable Member Bucky said, reaching out to external services is almost impossible. If students do not feel comfortable sharing with parents, they are seeking professional help. The stigma around therapy is what hinders teens from wanting to share with their parents, but also it is not necessary that teens have to share intimate details of their lives with their parents. Just reflect and think, if your parents know all the hardships endured by the last couple of years of your life, what would they think? By allowing the confidentiality age, students are being able to utilize the basic human right to seek help at the place they're feeling traumatized with. If school is beginning, thank you, Speaker.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member Vernon, and I call on the Honourable Member Kavanagh.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Kavanagh. I invite the government to detail with us why they think the youth mental health conversation should focus on the age of confidentiality rather than focusing on more pertinent matters such as safeguarding child safety more generally. Indeed, this bill aims to destigmatise young people reaching out for support, but stigma is inherently related to society and the social attitudes that constitute that society. If the government endeavours to encourage young people to seek out mental health treatment free of judgment, why not take a socio-ecological approach to addressing the enabling or disabling factors involved in accessing support, call for stricter child safeguarding regulations for mental health care practitioners, or even target school environments themselves? I invite the government to elaborate on how lowering the age of confidentiality fits in with child safe standards and wider efforts to encourage youth to seek out mental health support. In particular, how would this bill fit into the picture of instances of abuse or harm? For instance, a young person aged 17, living at home, still classified as a minor before the law, is experiencing abuse or is at risk of harm to themselves or others. Unless this young person is also receiving adequate support from social or child protection services, how will lowering the age of confidentiality safeguard the well-being of the minors involved? It cannot be contested that increasing equitable access to mental health care is critical, but I remain to be convinced that gatekeeping a patient's information is the most pressing means to do so.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Kavanagh, and I call on the next speaker.
Honourable Member Randhawa, respected Speaker, mental health practitioners should respect the right to dignity, privacy, and confidentiality of those they work with professionally is a simple statement that comes up when you search up ethical considerations made by psychologists or psychiatrists, by which we are referring to the mental health practitioners, but often one that is handled or neglected lightly when it comes to us. Like, why can't my information just stay between me and the therapist? Why should mom or dad need to be notified about their child's problems if they are not overly serious, which has been mentioned before in the bill? Are we incompetent to deal with it ourselves or too weak to handle it? Well, most of the time, this is not the case. Sometimes all we need is a conversation and to let things out, rather than your family and peers repeatedly asking you to talk to them, providing you with no real escape from these issues, as you are being constantly reminded of them. So with respect to our bill, lowering the age of confidentiality, we also aim to assure the younger generations that their information will not be disclosed by regulating or offering certain rules for our mental health practitioners to abide by, and even be held accountable for if they breach it. Keeping in mind the sheer gravity of this topic, we don't want our bill to appear on the ethics list, but a requirement that should be upheld by every mental health practitioner out there, may that be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution, and I call on the next speaker.
Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member Seta. We, the opposition, recognise the importance of privacy and confidentiality between youth and health practitioners. Therefore, we support the concept of the bill. What we cannot get behind necessarily is the execution and practicalities. The introduction and establishment of a new board, while supported with good intentions, is not imperative when there is an already established and national operating Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. This agency works with 15 national boards to help protect the public by regulating Australia's registered health practitioners. Together, their primary role is to protect the public and set standards and policies that all registered health practitioners must meet. In the agency's proposed national scheme, it consists of 5 core regulatory functions: professional standards, registration, notifications, compliance, and accreditation. These regulatory principles underpin the work of the national boards and the agency in regulating Australia's health practitioners in the public interest. Just from this, it begs the questions: is there a necessity for a whole new board constructed together to address complaints, or should we further upgrade and reform the current regulations agency to incorporate the importance of confidentiality in young people? With the newly introduced board, is there reassurance that a culture of diversity and experience is upheld, or will the board merely adopt a systematic approach, just like in the organizations? Should we come up with our own framework and legislation, or model it after that of other successful states where the age of confidentiality is upheld at 14 years in Northern Territory and 16 in New South Wales and South Australia? Speaker, I personally acknowledge the bill's philosophy is honourable. However, its implementation is up for debate. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Member for his contribution, and I call on the next speaker.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Jaman. Mental health is a huge rising issue, especially during the times of a pandemic, no doubt. Clause 8.2 of the bill states that a representative mental health review board will be established and shall have the right to overlook any complaints against a mental health practitioner or practice. By doing so, we strongly believe that it will hold practitioners accountable if they break confidentiality or any other code of conduct, whilst increasing accessibility. As Honourable Member Parikh mentioned before, culturally diverse minorities are more likely to have been brought up with the ideology that mental health is a hoax, and that mental illness such as depression and anxiety is just an excuse to be lazy. The stigma around seeking mental health support isn't being helped when these teens find out that their conversations with a mental health professional may possibly be informed to their parents, of whom, can I add, may be the root of the problem. We need our kids to be open to seeking help, not encourage them to hide away their emotions. If we can trust 16-year-olds to have their L's and get a job, why can't we trust them to know when they're in need of help? Yes, although laws state that a practitioner may only break confidentiality when an individual is either planning to harm themselves or others, but how can we properly protect and uphold this? How do we know that confidentiality isn't being breached? By lowering the age of mental health confidentiality and having established a review board, these students will be more open to seeking help, knowing that they can have a full, non-filtered conversation with a professional without the fear of getting other people involved. This is crucial in moving forward and growing as a mental health system. We cannot be any more clear than this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And do we have another speaker? Beautiful. I call on the Honourable Member Duong.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Duong. I would like to acknowledge the definition of breaching confidentiality as stated in Clause 3 and the penalties listed in Clause 8, since disclosing private information to third parties without consent breaches not only confidentiality but also human rights. However, I would like to ask whether the third party would also include the parents of those under 18 years of age. Usually, the parents and guardians are those who look after their children, and any information about their mental health issues would be shared with them. However, it would be contradictory to the bill if parents were included. So, would the bill potentially also eliminate disclosure of confidential information to parents? I accept the idea that mental health practitioners should be penalized for breaching confidentiality from Clause 8, unless there are exceptions as listed in Clause 5. However, under the current legislation, schools are required to disclose important information about students under the age of 18 years old to their parents to ensure their safety and well-being under the Privacy and Data Protection Act 2014 and the Health Records Act 2001. So will mental health patients still require parental permission if mental health facilities were to be accessed, which again would compromise the ideas of the government's proposed bill? Once again, the opposition acknowledges that this bill has the intention to ensure that children between the ages of 16 to 18 years feel more safe and build a stronger bond and interaction with their mental health practitioners. However, we ask that the government reflects on the bill and to think outside of the box on what the potential impacts that they are specifically aiming for. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Duong. Now, I believe that the floor is open. So I encourage any speakers from the sponsoring side of this debate. Beautiful. And I'll remind the House that we can only speak once. So if you have already shared, unfortunately, you can't share again. However, if you have contributions that you would like to add, I suggest that you pop them into your chamber Discord, and somebody else from your chamber might be able to pick those up. There will be a right of reply, but that will happen when the time for debate expires. So we have a little bit more time to hear from each chamber before we get there. So are there any members from the sponsoring side of this debate who would like to speak? And I'm just keeping an eye on the Discord where I can see arguments appearing. So I would encourage people from the sponsoring chamber to have a look at those. And if you feel confident to raise your hand to share some of those on behalf of the team who have sponsored this bill. And we're just going to let it sit for a moment because I can see the conversation unfolding. Lovely. And I call on the honourable member.
Honourable to get Hoonahs off the streets and provide a safe area to race.
Sorry, honourable member, I'm just going to stop you there because I believe that you may be a little bit early. I think that the speech that you were about to read is for the debate following this one. So I'll ask you to hold on to those thoughts, but we will come to that one soon, and we will call on you for that one. But in the meantime, are there other speakers from the sponsoring chamber? And I can only wait another moment or two, so I really encourage you, if you're thinking about it, to please raise your hand now. Lovely. I call on the honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Usman, I would just like to point out that the government's bill clearly has deep respect for 16-year-olds and pays homage to that. I would also like to acknowledge the fact that many individuals who are unable to maintain confidentiality do face I am going to very briefly pop in a trigger warning for youth homelessness, homophobia, queerphobia more generally, and negative youth mental health. Many of the individuals who are seeking psychological assistance with their issues are sometimes placed in direct danger because of the things that they are discussing, specifically around queer issues within some marginalized communities. Specifically, as a woman of South Asian heritage, I remember being disowned by my own family when I came out, and that was not facilitated by me, that was facilitated by my psychologist, who thought that would be important to mention to my family members. I would also like to point out that 16-year-olds are have a better understanding of their mental health than the adults that surround them. They have a stronger understanding of what issues affect them most vehemently in comparison to other people. Oh yes, that is all I'm going to say. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member. I really appreciate the contribution, and I know that your chamber does as well. I would now like to see if there are any speakers from the refuting chamber who would like to stand up and speak. And I'll remind the House that it is absolutely valid just to reiterate the point someone else has already made. That's more than fine as a speech. So if you don't have any original arguments to make, certainly shouldn't stop you from getting the chance to share. So do we have a speaker from the refuting chamber? And again, I'm just seeing a conversation unfold on Discord, so it looks a little bit promising, so I'm going to wait a moment. Or maybe not as promising as I thought. Unfortunately, I won't be able to wait too much longer. So if there is anyone who would like to stand, reminding people that they are more than welcome just to share a sentence or two on behalf of their chamber, that would be completely fine. And if we don't have anyone soon, then we will have to move to the right of reply. But before we do that, I just want to have one last assessment to see if anyone would like to speak. We've been doing so well so far. And I'm just going to wait another moment or two. And if we don't have anyone, then we will have to move on. So one final call. Is there anybody from the refuting chamber who would like to speak? Please do raise your hand now. And oh, lovely. Right before I was about to make the call too, I call on the honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Rich Jones. I would just like to point out that for parents that are concerned about their children, it is really important to know when there might be a safety risk or when a child a child may not know that they are a risk for themselves, and they may not know that their thoughts or their issues may be evolving to something much bigger. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member, for your contribution. And I just want to clarify, the next speaker is from the sponsoring chamber. Lovely. I call on the Honourable Member No.
Speaker, the Honourable Member No. I'd just like to point out to the opposition that what about the minors that are suffering abuse from home? Reducing the confidentiality age would be able to provide these minors with a safe haven, knowing that their psychologists cannot and will not discuss any of their mental health issues with the abusers. And if the mental health professional can provide a safe haven for them, they will be able to discuss what is happening at home to the psychologist, knowing that they will not suffer any of the repercussions from their abusers, therefore allowing them to be saved. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member No, for your contribution. And do we have another speaker from the refuting side? Is there anybody else who would like to speak? I can see plenty of sentences that you could just read verbatim from the Discord. I'm looking at them. If anyone has a little inkling they might like to jump up and share, now would be the moment to do that, because we don't have too much longer. So if there is anyone who hasn't spoken yet from the refuting chamber, and I'll just give that a second. And again, I'm gonna make the last call. Just a reminder to members of the House that you only have to speak for a few seconds, anywhere from 0 to 2 minutes. So if there is anyone who would like to take it up and just share a sentence or two on behalf of their chamber, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, this will be the very final call before we move to the right of reply. If there's anyone. Okay, in that case, I do think that the time for debate has expired, and I call on the sponsor of the bill for the right of reply. Do we have the sponsor of the bill? Is it the Honourable Member Dewar?
She'll be coming in a few seconds.
Lovely. We'll just wait a moment then. Lovely, the Honourable Member Dewar, please.
I would like to point out that it is clear that the bill has been debated well and thoroughly, but I feel as though the fine lines haven't been pointed out. Clause 6.2 clearly, explicitly states that there will be guidelines pursued, that they are threatening harm to themselves or others, or they are explicitly stating that they are in immense distress. It always happens that young individuals are assumed for, their decisions are made for. That is what the bill aims to fight. The stigma around mental health may be subjective to people. It may be a personal opinion, but that does not state that a young individual has no right to choosing if they are willing to share that, if they are willing to stand up for themselves. We forget that we too are young individuals. We forget that the fine lines of the bill haven't been read here. We all have forgotten what the bill aimed to start it out as. Yes, we validated the point, the emotion behind it, but I do not believe that the fine lines have been read of the bill. And I shall point it out that it has been explicitly stated with guidelines that were brought into impact, that will be brought into impact, that there's a review board with people to oversee that the mental health practitioners are doing their jobs necessarily how they're supposed to do them. I'm sure we as young individuals are not as experienced to speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member, for the right of reply. And the question now is that the lowering the age of mental health confidentiality bill be read a second and third time. So all those of that opinion say aye, and to the contrary, no. And we'll just let these votes come in. Beautiful. I think the ayes have it. And that brings us to the conclusion of that debate. So I want to start with a massive congratulations to the sponsoring team. You guys have done so well, and your bill has been passed. All the hard work over the past, I don't even know what number to put on it, however many months we've been on this program, your bill has now been passed. Huge congratulations. From a personal note on this bill, I'm a person who works with young people in my job, and I know a lot of young people who would really benefit from legislation like this, whose lives and whose relationship with health and mental health would be much better off. And so I absolutely commend the bill itself, and I commend youth parliamentarians for passing it through the House. I think that's wonderful. I also want to say that the debate was incredibly high quality, and I really appreciate the efforts that everybody has put into this. The prepared speeches were fantastic and really powerful, and so were the speeches of those who jumped up in support of their chamber when the floor opened up, or those who filled the role of a prepared speech, but also were mostly figuring their speech out as they went. Really, really well done. What a debate like this says to me is that as a chamber and as a house, we all have a really immense support for one another, and that's absolutely what we want to see in youth parliament. We are debating, but beyond that, we're all here because we're young people who care about really, really important issues and who want to discuss those. So being able to see all of you really pat each other on the back and walk alongside each other through this experience is very humbling from the perspective of a task force member and also as speaker. So yeah, huge congratulations, fantastic debate. I don't think I really have any feedback on a debating perspective. I really want to commend those who stood up when the floor opened. It was really wonderful to see, and the contributions were fantastic, whether they were long or short. They were all really fantastic, and it would be great to see more of that in the next debate too. I really appreciate it. I also want to note that for the debates where we don't have us in the role of speaker, but we have an MP, unfortunately they aren't in the Discord channel, so they won't be able to see the conversations happening and make their calls according to that. So you will need to be ready to jump up when the floor opens, but you've all shown us time and time again that you're fierce debaters and that you have great things to say. So I don't doubt that any contributions that you make when the floor opens up will be fantastic. And so, yeah, if we can have the